My name is Sarah Martinez, and I need to tell you what happened in my house, what happened to my family. Because if I don't tell someone, if I don't get this out, I think I might lose my mind completely. 3 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was my failing marriage. My husband, David, had turned into a stranger who came home drunk every night, screaming at me and the kids. I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to our family. I was wrong, so very wrong. You see, there are things in this world that feed on broken families. Things that smell desperation, like blood in the water. Things that move into your home when love moves out. And once they're there, once they've made themselves comfortable in your pain, they don't want to leave. But I also learned something else, something beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Even when evil finds its way into your life, even when you think you're completely alone and helpless, you're not. There are guardians watching over us. Angels, spirits, I don't know what to call them. They appear when we need them most. Sometimes they look like neighbors who move in across the street. Sometimes they look like hope when you have none left. This is my story. This is what evil doesn't want you to know. That even in our darkest moments, we are never truly abandoned. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Sarah Martinez. I'm 27 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I knew what rock bottom looked like. I have 2 children, Tyler, who's 8, and Emma, who just turned 2. And I have a husband named David, who I barely recognize anymore. The morning this all started, I was cleaning up broken glass in my kitchen. Again. David had thrown another beer bottle at the wall the night before during one of his drunken rages. This had become my routine. Wake up before the kids, clean up the evidence of David's anger, pretend everything was normal. I married David when I was 22, fresh out of college, full of dreams about our future together. He was charming, ambitious, and he made me laugh until my sides hurt. We were going to build something beautiful together, a family, a home filled with love and laughter. But somewhere along the way, David had gotten lost. The job stress, the bills, the responsibilities, they all piled up. And instead of facing them together, David started hiding in bottles. Beer after work became wine, with dinner became whiskey. Before bed became whatever he could get his hands on whenever he could get it. The man I married had been replaced by this angry stranger who blamed me for everything wrong in his life. When he lost his promotion, it was because I didn't support him enough. When the bills piled up, it was because I spent too much on groceries. When he felt like a failure, it was somehow my fault for making him feel that way. I kept telling myself it would get better, that he would realize what he was doing to our family and get help. But every day it got worse. The yelling got louder. The accusations got more cruel. And I started to see the fear in my children's eyes when they looked at their father. Tyler, my 8-year-old, had started having nightmares. He would crawl into bed with me after David passed out on the couch, whispering that he was scared Daddy was going to hurt someone. And little Emma, sweet, innocent Emma, she had started flinching whenever David raised his voice, even when he wasn't angry at her. I was trapped. I had no job. David had convinced me to stay home with the kids. I had no savings. Everything went into David's drinking or into keeping the house running. And I had no family nearby. We'd moved to this town for David's job, away from everyone I knew. That morning, as I swept up the glass and tried to figure out how to explain the hole in the wall to the kids, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. I was 27 years old, and I felt like my life was already over. But that morning was also when I first noticed that Emma was talking to someone I couldn't see. Emma had always been a quiet, observant child. Unlike Tyler, who talked constantly and asked a million questions, Emma preferred to watch and listen. She was one of those kids who seemed to understand everything, even though she couldn't say much yet. So when I found her in the living room that morning, sitting on the floor with her stuffed bunny, having what looked like a conversation with the empty corner by the window, I didn't think much of it. Kids have imaginary friends all the time, right? Especially kids in stressful households. Maybe it was her way of coping with all the tension in our home. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting down next to her on the carpet. Emma looked up at me with those big brown eyes and pointed toward the corner. "Friend," she said simply. "What's your friend's name?" She tilted her head like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then she looked back at me and shrugged. Even at 2, Emma was remarkably expressive. "Is your friend nice?" I asked. Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Nice friend, tall friend." I smiled and kissed the top of her head. At least someone in this house was happy, even if that someone was imaginary. But over the next few days, I started noticing things. Little things that I initially brushed off as coincidence or my own exhaustion. The coffee mug I'd left on the kitchen counter would be in the sink, even though I clearly remembered leaving it out. The TV would be on a different channel than I'd left it on. Books on the shelf would be slightly out of order. At first, I blamed David. Maybe he was moving things around during his late-night drinking sessions. Or maybe Tyler was getting into things when I wasn't looking. 8-year-olds could be sneaky when they wanted to be. But then I started paying closer attention. I would deliberately place things in specific spots and check on them later. A picture frame turned just slightly to the left. A kitchen chair pushed back from the table when I'd left it tucked in. Small things, subtle things, things that could easily be explained away. The problem was I was starting to notice a pattern. These little changes only happened when Emma was having her conversations with her tall friend. And Emma was having those conversations more and more often. She would sit in that same corner of the living room, chattering away in her toddler language, occasionally giggling like someone was telling her jokes. Sometimes she would hand her toys toward the empty space, like she was sharing them with someone. Emma seems to be really attached to her imaginary friend. I mentioned to David one evening after the kids had gone to bed. David barely looked up from his beer. "Kids do weird things. She'll grow out of it." "She talks to this friend for hours, David, and she's so specific about it. She always sits in the same spot, always faces the same direction." "So what? You want me to be worried about our kid having an imagination?" I tried a different approach. "I just think maybe with all the tension in the house lately, she might be using this friend as a way to cope. Maybe we should think about counseling for all of us." That got his attention. David's eyes flashed with anger, and he slammed his beer down on the coffee table. "There's nothing wrong with our family that a little less nagging from you wouldn't fix," he snapped. "Stop trying to turn everything into some big psychological drama." I should have dropped it. I knew better than to push David when he was drinking. But something about the way he dismissed our daughter's behavior, the way he dismissed my concerns, made something snap inside me. "David, she's 2 years old, and she's creating an imaginary friend because her father scares her. Don't you think that's worth talking about?" The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at me with a look I'd never seen before. Not just anger, something colder, something that made my blood freeze. "Don't you ever," he said slowly, his voice deadly quiet, "suggest that I'm the problem in this family again." I went to bed that night with my heart pounding, wondering what my marriage had become. And I fell asleep to the sound of Emma talking softly to her friend in the room next door. What I didn't know was that Emma's friend was very real, and it was just the beginning. The next few weeks passed in a haze of routine and growing unease. David's drinking got worse, if that was even possible. He was staying out later, coming home angrier, and sleeping on the couch more often than in our bed. Tyler was having more nightmares, and I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep a night. But it was the little things happening around the house that were really starting to get to me. At first, it was just objects being slightly out of place, but then it escalated. I would put Emma down for her nap, and when I came back to check on her 20 minutes later, all her stuffed animals would be arranged in a perfect circle around her crib. I would load the dishwasher before bed, and in the morning, all the dishes would be clean and put away, even though I knew I hadn't run the machine. The logical part of my brain kept trying to explain it away. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Maybe I was doing these things and forgetting. Maybe the stress of my failing marriage was making me lose track of reality. But then there was Emma. My 2-year-old daughter was having detailed conversations with someone I couldn't see, and those conversations were getting longer and more animated every day. She would laugh at jokes I couldn't hear. She would nod like she was receiving instructions. And sometimes she would look worried, like her friend was telling her something serious. "Emma, what does your friend tell you?" I asked her one afternoon while we were coloring together. She looked up from her crayon and pointed toward the corner where she always sat to talk to her friend. "Friend says be careful, friend says watch mama." "Watch mama? What does that mean, sweetheart?" Emma went back to her coloring, but I could see she was thinking hard about something. Finally, she looked up at me again. "Friend says bad things here, but friend keeps us safe." A chill ran down my spine. What kind of bad things? But Emma had lost interest in the conversation and was focused on her drawing again. I tried to ask more questions, but she just kept coloring like I wasn't there. That night, after the kids were asleep and David had passed out on the couch with an empty bottle next to him, I decided to do some investigating. I grabbed a flashlight and walked through every room of the house, looking for, I don't know what, signs of an intruder, evidence that someone else had been in our home. Everything looked normal. But when I got back to the living room, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The corner where Emma always sat to talk to her friend. The carpet was worn down in a perfect oval shape, like someone had been standing there for hours and hours, shifting their weight from foot to foot. But Emma always sat on the floor. She never stood in that spot. I knelt down and ran my hand over the worn patch of carpet. It was warm, not just warm, hot, like someone had been standing there moments before. I jerked my hand back and stumbled backward, my heart racing. There was no way that carpet should be warm. The heat in the house had been off for hours, and nobody had been in that room since Emma had gone to bed. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight app, shining it all around the corner. Nothing, just walls and carpet, and the old bookshelf we'd inherited from David's grandmother. But as I was about to turn away, I noticed something else. On the dusty shelf, someone had drawn a symbol with their finger. It looked like a cross, but not quite. More like 2 intersecting lines with small curves at the ends. I definitely hadn't drawn it. David never touched that bookshelf, and Tyler couldn't reach that high, which left Emma, But Emma was 2 years old and barely tall enough to reach the bottom shelf, let alone the one where this symbol had been drawn. I took a picture of the symbol with my phone, then carefully wiped it away with my sleeve. My hands were shaking. As I headed upstairs to bed, I heard Emma's voice drifting from her room. She was awake, talking softly to someone. "Thank you for watching, friend. Thank you for keeping the bad things away." I stood outside her door, listening, my heart pounding so hard, I was sure she would hear it. "Will you stay all night, friend?" "Mama's scared. I can tell." There was a pause, like she was listening to a response. "Okay, I'll tell her tomorrow. I'll tell her you're here to help." I crept to my bedroom and closed the door quietly behind me, but I didn't sleep at all that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing my mind or if something impossible was happening in my house. The next morning, I found that symbol drawn in the dust on 3 more shelves throughout the house. And Emma started telling me about the shadow people who came at night. The shadow people. That's what Emma called them. According to my 2-year-old daughter, they came out at night when the house was quiet. They moved along the walls like living shadows, and they whispered things that made her scared. But her tall friend always made them go away. "They don't like the light, Mama," Emma told me one morning over breakfast. "Friend makes light, and they run away." I was trying to stay calm, trying to convince myself that this was all just an elaborate childhood fantasy brought on by the stress in our home. But it was getting harder to explain away the things I was seeing with my own eyes. The symbols kept appearing, always in dusty places, always drawn with someone's finger, always in spots that Emma couldn't possibly reach. I started taking pictures of them before I wiped them away, building a collection of evidence that made no sense. And the objects around the house weren't just moving anymore. They were being arranged, kitchen knives laid out in perfect rows on the counter. All the clocks in the house stopped at 3:17 a.m. Family photos turned face down, except for one, a picture of just me and the kids, which was always left upright. The worst part was that David didn't see any of it, or if he did, he didn't care. His drinking had reached the point where he was barely conscious when he was home, and when he was conscious, he was angry about everything. The bills, the house, the kids, me, especially me. "You're losing it, Sarah," he told me one night when I tried to show him a photo of one of the symbols. "First, you're paranoid about Emma's imaginary friend. Now you're seeing things. Maybe you should talk to someone." "David, look at this picture. Look at this symbol. I didn't draw this." He glanced at my phone screen for maybe 2 seconds. "It's dust and smudges, Sarah. You're seeing patterns that aren't there because you're stressed out." Then explain why Emma knows about shadow people. Explain why she talks about her friend keeping bad things away. Kids pick up on energy in the house. She knows we're fighting, so she's creating stories to deal with it. It's not rocket science. But I knew it was more than that. I could feel it. The house felt different now, heavy, like the air itself was thick with something wrong. I would walk into a room and feel like I was being watched, even when no one else was there. I would hear footsteps upstairs when everyone was downstairs. I would catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision that disappeared when I turned to look. And the temperature in certain parts of the house was wrong. The corner where Emma talked to her friend was always warm, like someone was standing there. But other corners, other rooms, were freezing cold even on hot days. Tyler started having worse nightmares. He would wake up screaming about the dark man who stood at the foot of his bed. When I asked him to describe the dark man, he said it looked like a person made of smoke who whispered mean things about our family. "What kind of mean things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "He says Daddy's going to hurt you, Mama. He says our family is going to break apart. He says he's going to help make it happen faster." My blood turned to ice. Tyler was 8 years old. He shouldn't be having thoughts like that, let alone dreams about them. That's when I started to understand what was happening. Something was feeding on the negativity in our house. The fighting, the fear, the anger. It was like fuel for whatever had moved in with us. And the worse things got with David, the stronger this presence became. Emma's friend, her guardian, I was starting to think of him, was trying to protect us. But he was fighting against something that was growing stronger every day. I tried to research what was happening to us. I spent hours online reading about paranormal activity, poltergeists, demons. Most of it sounded like nonsense, but some things rang true. Spirits that fed on negative emotions. Entities that attached themselves to families in crisis. Dark forces that grew stronger in broken homes. The common thread in all the stories was that these things didn't just randomly pick houses to haunt. They were drawn to pain, to fear, to desperation. They found families that were already falling apart and pushed them over the edge. That's when I realized that David's drinking, his anger, his transformation into someone I didn't recognize. What if it wasn't just stress? What if something had been influencing him, pushing him toward the worst version of himself? The thought terrified me, because if that was true, then we weren't just dealing with a marriage that was falling apart. We were dealing with something that wanted our family destroyed. And it was winning. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night in October. David came home drunker than I'd ever seen him, stumbling through the front door and immediately starting to yell about the house being a mess, about dinner not being ready, about me being a terrible wife and mother. Tyler and Emma were both crying. I was trying to calm them down, while David ranted and raved, throwing things and punching walls. And then, in the middle of his tirade, all the lights in the house went out. In the darkness, I heard Emma's voice, small and scared. "Friend says the shadow people are very strong tonight. Friend says we need to be brave." That's when I heard it. A voice that wasn't David's, wasn't mine, wasn't either of my children's. A whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. "She will leave him, or we will make her leave everything." And I knew with absolute certainty that we were in serious trouble. The next morning, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this. My children couldn't keep living like this. Whatever was happening in our house, whether it was supernatural or just the result of David's alcoholism destroying our family, I had to do something. I spent the day trying to figure out how to leave a marriage when you have no money, no job, and no family nearby. But every path I explored led to dead ends. I felt more trapped than ever. That evening, after putting the kids to bed and enduring another one of David's drunken rants, I found myself sitting on the front porch steps. It was past midnight, and a heavy rain had started to fall. I didn't care that I was getting soaked. The cold rain felt cleaner than the toxic air inside my house. I was crying, sobbing really, when I heard footsteps on the wet pavement. Through the rain and darkness, I could barely make out a tall figure walking slowly down our street. He was wearing a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that kept his face in shadow. Most people would have hurried past a crying woman sitting alone in the rain at midnight. But this man stopped at the edge of our driveway and stood there for a moment, like he was deciding something. "Rough night?" he asked. His voice was deep and gentle, with a quality that reminded me of warm honey and old wisdom. "You could say that," I replied, wiping my eyes, even though the rain was washing my tears away anyway. "Mind if I ask what's got you sitting in the rain at this hour?" There was something about his presence that made me feel safe, even though I couldn't see his face clearly. Maybe it was because he didn't try to come closer, didn't invade my space. He just stood there in the rain, waiting. "My life is falling apart," I said simply. "My husband drinks too much, my kids are scared, and I don't know how to fix any of it." "That's a heavy burden for anyone to carry alone." "I'm alone, that's the problem." The man was quiet for a long moment, and I could feel him studying me through the darkness and rain. "You know," he said finally, "I've seen a lot of families in crisis over the years, and the ones who make it through, the ones who find their way back to the light, they all have one thing in common." "What's that?" "They refuse to give up, even when everything seems hopeless, even when the darkness feels like it's winning. They hold on to faith in something bigger than themselves." "I don't know if I have that kind of faith anymore." "Your daughter does." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "Emma. She talks to me sometimes. Tells me about the shadow people, about how scared she is for her mama. But she also talks about how brave you are, how hard you're fighting to protect her and her brother." I stared into the darkness where his face should be. "How do you know about Emma? How do you know about—" "I know because I've been watching over your family. The symbols that appear in your house, the warm corner where Emma feels safe. That's my way of letting you know that you're not fighting this battle alone." "You're Emma's tall friend," I whispered. "I'm a lot of things to a lot of people, but yes, I suppose I am." "What are you? Are you—" "What I am isn't as important as why I'm here. Your family is under attack, Sarah. Not just from your husband's demons, but from something much darker. Something that feeds on broken homes and shattered dreams. The shadow people Emma talks about. Among other things, but here's what you need to understand. They're only as powerful as you allow them to be. Fear feeds them. Despair strengthens them. But faith sends them running." "I don't understand. What am I supposed to do?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out something small and silver. Even in the rain and darkness, it seemed to catch light that wasn't there. "Take this," he said, holding out a simple silver cross on a chain. "And remember that when you stand up to darkness, any kind of darkness, you don't stand alone." I reached out and took the cross. The moment it touched my skin, I felt warmth spread through my entire body, pushing back the cold rain and the fear that had been my constant companion for months. But how do I fight something I can't see? How do I protect my children from entities that shouldn't even exist? The same way you protect them from anything else that threatens them. With love, with courage, with the absolute conviction that nothing, and I mean nothing, is stronger than a mother defending her children. What if I'm not strong enough? You are. Your daughter's friend, that's me by the way, has been trying to show you that for weeks. Every time you clean up David's messes and keep going. Every time you comfort your children after he scares them. Every time you choose love over anger, hope over despair. You've been fighting this battle all along. You just didn't realize it. Will you help me? When it comes down to it, will you be there? I'm always here, Sarah, but the real fight, the one that matters, that has to come from you. I don't even know your name. Names aren't important. What's important is that you remember what I'm telling you. Faith defeats fear. Light defeats darkness, and love, especially a mother's love, defeats everything else. The rain was starting to let up, and I realized I felt different, stronger, like something inside me had awakened. Will I see you again? When you need to. And with that, he tipped his hat. I caught just a glimpse of wise, kind eyes beneath the brim and walked away into the night. I watched until he disappeared into the darkness, and only then did I realize that in all our conversation, I had never asked his name. When I went back inside that night, wearing his cross around my neck, I felt ready for whatever was coming. And it was a good thing, because the final battle was about to begin. That night, when David came home drunk and started his usual routine of yelling and throwing things, I did something I'd never done before. I stood up to him. And that's when all hell broke loose. "David, stop," I said firmly, stepping between him and the children's rooms. "You're scaring Tyler and Emma." David stared at me like I'd grown a second head. In 5 years of marriage, I had never directly confronted him during one of his episodes. "Don't tell me what to do in my own house," he slurred, but there was something different in his voice, something darker than just alcohol. "This is my house too, and those are my children. You don't get to terrorize them anymore." That's when I saw it. Just for a split second, David's eyes went completely black. Not the pupils, the entire eye, like looking into an abyss. And when he spoke, his voice was layered, like multiple people talking at once. "You cannot stop what has already begun. This family will be destroyed." But I was wearing Grace's cross, and I could feel Emma's tall friend standing behind me. And for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. "No," I said, my voice steady and strong. "You need to leave. All of you, get out of my house." The lights started flickering. The temperature in the room dropped so fast I could see my breath. David, or whatever was speaking through David, started laughing, but it wasn't his laugh. It was the sound of breaking glass and screaming wind. "You think your little trinket can protect you? You think your imaginary guardian can save you? We have been feeding on this family for months. We are strong now." That's when Tyler and Emma's bedroom doors burst open, and both children came running out. Tyler was crying, and Emma was holding her stuffed bunny tight against her chest. "Mama, the shadow people are everywhere," Emma whispered. "But the tall friend says it's time to fight." And suddenly I could see them. The shadow people Emma had been talking about. They were sliding along the walls like living darkness, with eyes like red embers and mouths full of whispers. There were dozens of them, all focused on my family, all hungry for our fear and pain. But I could also see Emma's tall friend now. He was standing behind my children, and he was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Tall and strong, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. Light seemed to emanate from him, pushing back the darkness wherever it touched. "You see now," David's voice said, but it wasn't David anymore. "You see what you are truly fighting. How can one broken woman defeat so many of us?" I looked at my children, Tyler brave and frightened at the same time, Emma calm because she trusted her friend to protect us. I looked at the guardian who had been watching over us all this time, and I thought about Grace's words. "You are not fighting alone." I took the cross in my hand and held it up. "Because I'm not just one broken woman," I said. "I'm a mother, and I believe in something stronger than fear." I closed my eyes and prayed. Not any specific prayer from any specific religion, but a prayer from my heart. I asked for protection for my children. I asked for strength to face whatever came next. I asked for the darkness to leave my family alone, and I felt something answer. The cross around my neck grew warm, then hot. Light began to fill the room, not from any lamp or fixture, but from everywhere at once. The shadow people started screaming, a sound like nails on a chalkboard that made my teeth ache. "Get behind me, children," I said, and Tyler and Emma immediately moved to stand behind me. The thing wearing David's face hissed and cowered away from the light. "This changes nothing. He will still drink. He will still hurt you. We will return." "No," I said, feeling strength flow through me like electricity. "You won't, because I'm done being afraid. I'm done letting you feed on my family's pain. And I'm done letting you use my husband as your puppet." I walked toward David, the cross glowing brighter with each step. The shadows writhed and shrieked around me, but they couldn't touch me. "David," I called out, "I know you're still in there. I know this isn't you. Come back to us." For just a moment, David's real eyes flickered back. "Sarah," he whispered, and his voice was his own again. I can't control it. It's been in my head for months, telling me to hurt you, telling me you don't love me."